of body slamming our Department of Education. So what does that mean for a place like New York? $5 billion in cuts. We're talking about billions of dollars lost in Pell Grants, money for kids with disabilities, programs that are helping our kids in rural areas and mental health. I mean, what they're doing is saying our kids don't matter. What they're doing is saying our kids don't matter. What's more important is that we slash for the sake of slashing and also be able to fund tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. So instead of supporting a math class, they're supporting tax breaks for the buddies at Mar-a-Lago. So that's the reality we're dealing with here in New York. And I have to give some news to everybody. And this is a message from all the governors. We're not going to be able to backfill losses like this scale, $5 billion. So the children are going to suffer. But there's only one way to reverse this before the next presidential election, and that is in the midterms. That is what happens in 2026, and that's another whole topic, but that's what I'm laser focused on, is building a firewall in the House of Representatives at least, and possibly the Senate, so we can stop the insanity and put our focus on the kids. What we do now with this generation of kids is going to make a difference for generations to come, because it's an investment in the future workforce. And we are in global competition with other countries. And if we stop these investments now, then we're basically saying we give up. We're not even going to compete. I'm not going to stand for that here in the state of New York. So as always, I'm calling on teachers and advocates and parents and students. Use your voices and stand up and scream from the mountaintops. This must stop. And I want to shame them into everything they're contemplating and doing and saying, don't do this to our kids. I'm New York's first mom governor. So anything that happens to our children is personal to me. So that's my message from New York.
Governor, thank you so much. Thank you for leading the way for New York's children and also this country. We need more of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look, folks, there is strong and widespread opposition to dismantling the Department of Education. We are talking to teachers, families, students, superintendents of schools, college leaders, policymakers. You're going to hear from many of them on this call, underscoring the urgency and the depth of concern. This dismantling of the Department of Education is not what families want. They've made their voices heard. They want a department that provides excellent education for all students, who safeguards these students. Unfortunately, this administration has no idea how to deliver on any of that. EdTrust has been actively working with communities to ensure their voices are heard. We have engaged directly with the most impacted, amplifying their concerns, lifting up their concerns, and pushing for policies that center opportunity and access for all students, and especially those traditionally underserved. This isn't just one group speaking out, as you will hear from our speakers. It is a collective moment demanding change. This broad coalition tells us we believe in public education. We believe in a federal role that protects students, and action is necessary. I'm so glad to have my friend and amazing leader, John King, former Secretary of Education, current Chancellor of the State University of New York. John, welcome.
Thanks so much, Janice, and really appreciate your leadership and Governor Hochul's leadership. It's heartbreaking to be in a conversation about the dismantling of the education department. We should be talking about national leadership on improving educational outcomes. How do we close the gaps in performance, particularly for our lowest income students, for our students with disabilities? We should be talking about how do we help more students graduate from college and go on to successful careers in the jobs that we need to fill in this 21st century economy. But instead, we're talking about the Trump administration's misguided plans to end the Department of Education. The stakes are very high. The governor talked about it. If you eliminate the Title I program, you're talking about taking billions of dollars from the schools that serve low-income students. That will mean teacher layoffs. That will mean larger class sizes. That will mean fewer after-school and enrichment programs, fewer AP classes, fewer opportunities for kids. If you take away the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding that the department delivers to schools, you're talking about longer waits for families to get speech language services, to get students who are struggling to read the help they need to succeed. If you take away the Pell Grant program, you're talking about denying the American dream to countless students who depend on that program to access higher education. This is exactly the wrong direction for the country. The history of the Education Department is as a civil rights agency, the place that ensures that students with disabilities get the services they need, that English learners get the help that they need, that women are protected against sexual assault and sexual harassment on campuses. That's where this happens, in the Office for Civil Rights at the department. Taking that away harms students and families. This is part of a broader attack on public education, on public institutions. And this is a moment where we need Congress to step up and stand up, and we need state and local leaders to make their voice heard in defense of public education.
Thank you, Chancellor King. So appreciate that you've been here with us today. And also very excited to hear from one of my friends and colleagues, Becky Pringle, President of the National Education Association.
Hey, Denise, I think President Pringle's running a couple minutes late, but
No worries, no worries. We are moving on. We'll hear from her later. So now I'm really excited because, again, another friend and colleague and a mom of boys just like me. We're going to hear from founder and president of the National Parents Union, Carrie Rodriguez.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, that is actually my most important title, is being Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. It's also my honor to be the president of the National Parents Union, which is an affiliated network of about 1,800 pockets of parent power in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, representing about 2 million families across the country. And I'm here today on behalf of all of them to sound the alarm about this administration's intent to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. And we know that this is going to cause significant chaos for American families. We know that it is going to have devastating consequences for our public schools, for our teachers, but most importantly, our children. Because this executive order, it's not just about bureaucracy. It's about our children's future and their lives. And if we don't stop it, families everywhere are going to directly feel the impact. Because let's be clear about what this means. The DOE, or ED, provides billions of dollars to our school every single year. Funding that ensures that our support staff, our special education services, our resources for struggling schools are there, and we can depend on them. This executive order would gut that funding. It would leave states and local districts scrambling to fill the gaps. And let's be honest about that, especially in our red states, many of them will not be able to. We're going to witness massive layoffs of teachers and support staff, larger class sizes, school closures. It's going to force kids to travel longer distances to get an education. And the loss of funding for special education programs for kids like mine will be absolutely catastrophic. Let's be transparent about this. Pushing education down to the states doesn't work. We've done this before. And in fact, dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, we tried it before under the Reagan administration, and it was a mess, and Ronald Reagan had to walk it back. But we need to remember what education was like before we had a U.S. Department of Education. There is a reason why we created this agency, because 50 or 60 years ago, you had children who were blind, who were deaf, who had Down syndrome, who were denied access to classrooms. We had children with autism who weren't sent to classrooms, they were sent to institutions. We did that. And parents were forced to seek relief from the federal government through lawsuits. Parents were forced to sue for access and had to be walked into classrooms. Our children had to be walked into classrooms by federal marshals because states were not making the right decisions. There is a reason why we had to create the U.S. Department of Education to make sure our kids had equitable access to education. because before this agency's creation, parents were left to our own devices, and too many of us don't have those resources. This is a direct attack on our school's ability to function. And who is going to pay that price? It's our children, it's families, it's millions of families who are already under attack by this administration, who are worried about the chaos every single day that we are feeling from these nonstop executive orders. So I urge every parent, every educator, every community member to stand up and fight back. This is not about politics. This is about ensuring that every single child, no matter their zip code, no matter their income level, no matter their ability, has access to education, and a quality one. Dissolving the U.S. Department of Education is going to be a bureaucratic nightmare for parents. And we've got to demand that Congress stand up and take action to protect our schools. We have to make sure that our voices are heard today and every day. The future of public education and the future of our children depends on it.
Carrie, thank you so much. And thank you for just sort of centering us on why this matters, our students and our families. We will now hear from Dr. Winnie Williams-Hall, a teacher with Educators for Excellence, who will tell us about some of the direct impact of this decision on students. Dr. Hall?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Dr. Winnie Williams-Hall, and I teach elementary setting as a special education teacher for Chicago Public Schools. I'm also a member of Educators for Excellence, and I'm here representing 40,000 members nationwide who advocate for teachers to have a leading voice in policies that directly impact our classrooms. I'm here today because I, like thousands of educators across the country, am outraged by this administration's reckless plans to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. Confirming Linda McMahon to lead the department with the knowledge that she would agree to eliminate it, it actually shows how little our leaders care about our nation's kids. As educators, we see firsthand the critical role that the department plays. We understand that it strives hard to ensure that every child, especially children with disabilities, English language learners, and students from marginalized communities, has access to a high-quality education. Eliminating the Department of Education is not just irresponsible, it is a direct attack on students, schools, and the future of education in America. And it will make it harder for students to succeed, not just in school, but in life. A well-educated population is essential for a country's social and economic well-being. This administration has professed to want to make America great again. But this move, like many others it has made, does not support that goal. It, in fact, does the opposite. As a special educator, I am intimately familiar with the ways that the department's funding, guidance, and oversight support my students. In Chicago in particular, we already feel the impact of budgets that don't meet our needs. Reduced special education federal funding would mean the loss of paraprofessionals. It would mean schools sharing social workers instead of having their own social worker assigned to that school. It would mean the lack of one-on-one support, failing grades, lower self-esteem, and students basically feeling like they're lost in a crowd. These students already suffer the cost of an inequitable education system. Eliminating the department will make this even more true, and it means moving backwards instead of forward. The consequences will be felt by students who can least afford it. E4E's 2025 National Teacher Survey shows that teachers resoundingly reject President Trump's educational policies. So instead of dismantling the department, educators are calling for real solutions that support and not sabotage our schools. Fully funded public schools, safe and inclusive classrooms, and a curriculum that reflects the truth. Listen, there's no system in place today that's without flaws. We understand that. And I agree that change is needed. So as educators, we're calling on Congress to oppose any attempt to dismantle the department and instead commit to reimagining public education. We refuse to stand by while our students' futures are put at risk. The stakes are too high to be silent. Our students are counting on us, and we will not back down. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams Hall. And I'm so glad that you brought up the fact that we are not about the status quo, right? We know that there are areas of improvement that we need to tackle. We are not about the status quo, but we do believe in reimagining public education. Thank you so much for that. Now we are going to hear from Renee Seckel from Red Wine and Blue. She's going to provide us additional thoughts from the parent perspective. Renee?
Thank you, Denise. Hi, my name is Renee Seckel, and I'm the Deputy Director of Distributed Organizing at Red Wine and Blue. But more importantly, I'm the mother of 2 public school students in Wake County, North Carolina, as well as one very recent grad. Since 2011, all 3 of my kids have enjoyed the solid grounding and the stability that our public schools provide. I stand in awe of the teachers and administrators who make miracles for our children every day, even as they're constantly asked to do more with less. And that's why I'm here today to sit in protest of President Trump's intention to demolish the federal agency responsible for making sure our children have the best possible education. The U.S. Department of Education looks out for the most vulnerable kids, kids with disabilities, kids in small rural districts that can't really afford to educate their children with local tax dollars, and kids who live in areas of high poverty. Not only does the Department of Education provide much needed funding for school children, but it also serves a critical role in protecting children from discrimination at school. So I ask, why would the Trump administration be looking to dissolve it? Why are Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Linda McMahon so hell-bent on defunding public schools and harming the tens of millions of children who attend those schools? In my own state of North Carolina, federal funding makes up nearly 20% of our public school budget. We've got about 1.5 million public school children, and almost half of them are what the policymakers call economically disadvantaged. 13% of our kids, including one of mine, rely on IEPs or 504 plans supported by federal funding. But President Trump wants to take away the agency and the funding that helps make sure that these kids can get a decent education. School districts will be left to find ways to fill these massive cuts to their budgets, and students will get hurt. Linda McMahon has claimed that the federal government is merely handing education back to the states, but that in itself is an astonishingly callous statement. Because let me tell you, the state isn't going to compensate for that lost federal funding. To the contrary, our Republican legislature has for my entire adult life, and I am not young, been defying state court orders to fund our schools to a bare minimum constitutional standard, while at the same time pouring almost $1 billion a year into private school vouchers for the richest people in North Carolina. Without federal help, schooling in North Carolina will increasingly be allocated only to wealthy, white, non-disabled, straight kids. And that isn't okay. It is not okay for the United States of America to proclaim its greatness while its president and his followers systematically and methodically go about hurting children. So I call upon all school officials, all members of state, county, and local school boards, and all parents to stand up against the closing of the Department of Education and to stand up for our children and the public schools they attend. At Run White and Blue, we are encouraging our community to spread the word about what Trump is planning to do to our public schools, research their school boards to see who's on it and what they're doing to protect our students, and to stand up every day communicating with our legislators about the need to keep the Department of Education open. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Really important and powerful words. I just want to lift up something you said about what Project 2025 hopes to achieve, what this administration hopes to achieve. It is really tied to making sure that families who are already taking advantage of vouchers have more access to more money, that it is a giveaway to these families. It is not about providing a quality education to all. And here's someone that knows about this. I'm so pleased to be able to welcome the president of the National Education Association, Becky Pringle, who has been leading the charge in so many ways on behalf of nearly 3 million teachers. Thank you, Becky, for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be with you in community as we stand up and fight for our kids, what they need and what they deserve. I am Becky Pringle. I taught middle school science for 31 years before I had the honor of being the president of this nation's largest union, the National Education Association. What that allows me to do is travel all over the country and listen to millions of voices of educators, teachers, support staff, from those who teach our kids to those who nurse and nurture our kids, to those who drive our kids or feed our kids, and to parents and to the students themselves. And this is what I hear. This is not what this country is about. For us to be focused on taking more away from our students instead of giving them more in a time when we are still recovering from a pandemic, in a time when we know the gaps are getting wider and not closing, at a time when our students need us more. We have an administration that is letting Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies raid the Department of Education and take away those much needed funds from our kids so they can find tax cuts for billionaires. Let's be clear about what's happening. And it's very clearly stated in Project 2025. Now, I know that most people don't know necessarily what the Department of Education does, but they're finding out, aren't they? They're finding out that the federal government has a role to play in the education level of government has a role to play. And the historic role of the federal government has been to help close those gaps for our most vulnerable students, our Black and Brown and Indigenous students, our students living in poverty, our students who don't have housing security, our students whose parents are working 4 and 5 jobs, our students with disabilities. The federal government has a role to play. And we know the last thing those students, all of our students, need is for the over 400,000 jobs, education jobs that are funded out of federal dollars. If those are we know what's going to happen. Our class sizes are going to, we know that our students won't get individualized attention that they need. We know they won't get the services that allow them to live into their brilliance. This is not okay. And that's why you are seeing educators and parents and community members who are saying, no, we will organize, we will mobilize, we will use our voices, and we will tell the true stories of students who are losing services. And by the way, it's not hypothetical. It's happening right now. Education jobs being lost right now. The restriction of students' right to learn and educators' right to teach is happening right now. That's why the NEA filed suit today against the efforts of this administration to limit our ability to teach the true history of this country and the impact that it has to this day, for our students to be able to see themselves and see each other so they can be the critical thinkers and collaborative problem solvers we need them to be the leaders of a just society. So we will not stop. We will stand up because we know that our students, our babies, are depending on us to be worthy of them.
Becky, so powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody who's on this call today. We need to get the word out. Let me just, before I close, we need to hear from a student because that's where the real deal is. So Dulce Gasca Perez is joining us, and she's going to talk real talk, folks. So Dulce, come join us.
Thank you so much, Denise. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dulce Gasca Perez, and I'm a first-generation college student studying public policy at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm here today to speak to you because the future of students like me, students with disabilities, are being threatened by Trump's plans to dismantle the Department of Education. I grew up in North Carolina navigating a public education system that wasn't always built for students like me. Year after year, I had hoped that my teachers would be understanding of my disability, providing accommodations for my chronic pain and frequent absences. Every single day, protections from IDEA and Section 504 help disabled students thrive in the classroom without the fear that they could be denied the education they deserve. Every year since 1975, Congress has failed to meet its initial commitment to fund 40% of IDEA, which places the responsibility of making up that difference on states and local schools. That shortfall puts a massive strain on resources, making it harder for schools to support students with disabilities. Right now, the future of disability rights is on the line. If Donald Trump gets his way, already underfunded programs will take an even bigger hit. Across the country, 7.4 million students with disabilities depend on accommodations supported by the department to get the equitable education they're entitled to. And without a federal agency enforcing these safeguards, there's nothing stopping schools from cutting corners and leaving students behind. But it isn't just protections for students with disabilities. In higher education, federally funded programs are keeping students like me in college. 87% of first-time undergraduates rely on federal aid. For millions of students like me, our chances at an affordable education would disappear right alongside the department. Without the Department of Education and the federal support I receive, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I do today, least of all the ability to earn a degree from my dream school. Trump's plans directly target longstanding protections for disabled students that have the power to transform lives. It's imperative that we do not let that happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dulce. We're gonna wrap up. I just want to thank everybody on this call for joining us today. We scheduled this on the off chance that the EO to dismantle education would be released today. It hasn't, but that doesn't mean it's not going to come. Let's be real about that. This is their intention. This is what they've said. They do not believe in the students and families that have benefited from public education. One thing that we heard today is that we need the department to ensure that all students have pathways to succeed and thrive. As Dulce said, we cannot lose services for students with disabilities, such as support for kiddos who have been diagnosed with dyslexia. We also cannot trust all states to direct resources to the communities that states have already failed for years. Few states currently provide the dollars necessary to fully fund education in their states on their own. That after school program that your kiddo goes to every day after school to keep them safe could be gone. What about our students, such as our LGBTQIA students, who continue to be bullied? What about several school districts in this country who have fought to make sure that only certain students can attend those schools? Let's be clear, this EO is going to create chaos for schools, families, and communities, and we will oppose it, and we will oppose it with the communities behind our backs. I want to open the floor to questions. I really do thank everybody for showing up. If anybody wants to speak to any of our presenters, please email a